Welcome to Mo's Market Pulse. I'm your host, Sara Mokaram, founder of Mo Digital Solutions, where we help businesses hit their revenue goals and thrive. On this podcast, we talk with industry leaders about their business, market trends, growth strategies, and what's ahead. Today, we have Alejandro, founder and CEO of Userlytics. Thank you so much for joining me today and taking the time to be our guest.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Sarah. Glad to be
Sure.
here.
So, I'm really excited just to have the opportunity to speak with someone who's been really leading innovation in the UX research space for over a decade now. So, before we dive in, I'd love to just take a step back and get a sense of your journey, where it began, and what brought you to this point. So, can you share kind of what sparked the original idea for Userlytics back in 2009 and what gap in the market you were most passionate about solving at the time?
Sure. So my background previous to Userlytics was in a variety of roles that had a relationship. So, for example, early in my career, I was testing nuclear power plants. So I was either testing them directly or designing the test procedures for nuclear power plants. Later in my career, when I was working in Japan, I was running a market research consultancy. And then later in my career, when I was running a few telecom firms in Spain, a large percentage of our client base were consumers. So things like usability and user experience were things that I could directly see how important they were. So I did not, full disclosure, I did not come up with the idea for Userlytics. We were actually running a completely different company, and that wasn't working. It was, some startups work, some don't, and that was not working. But an employee came up with the idea, and I really loved it. The ability to see what your customers, what your prospects, what your users are doing as they interact with your products, with your websites, with your mobile apps in a quick manner, almost instantaneously, anywhere in the world. I thought, wow, that's brilliant. That's something that I wish I had had when I was running telecom firms or when I was involved in some of my other ventures.
Great. And so running a global UX platform with some major clients is no small feat. So, what were some pivotal moments or tough decisions early on that really shaped how you built this company?
Sure. So I guess I could say that from the very beginning, it was clear to me that this kind of feedback was super important and that many different organizations, whether it's marketing, market research, customer service, innovation, product management, etc., would benefit from this platform. But, there's a lot of inertia built into, especially if you're running a B2B startup. You're going to organizations that they have an established way of doing things. So I like to use the allegory of the toothbrush. Imagine if you were born into a world where the toothbrush didn't exist. So you'd go through life and occasionally you'd get a toothache and you'd go to the dentist. That was expensive, took a while, you did it every so often, etc. That's the world that we saw in terms of UX research and usability testing when we launched in 2009. And what we launched was, if you will, the toothbrush. But if you launch a toothbrush, you have to convince people to use it. Now, if I'm 30 years old and somebody says, hey, you've never used a toothbrush in your life, why don't you start using it? It's going to take a while before that gels. So getting people to adopt your solution when it's changing the way they work, their flow, especially in a B2B setting, that's not an easy task. And we went through a few years of just trying to find that ideal customer profile, that ICP, which ultimately became the UX researchers and the UX designers that about 2 or 3 years after we launched, the C-suite started realizing how important user experience was and started dedicating more budgets and resources to those kinds of departments. And that's really when our business really took off.
See, yeah, I love that comparison with the toothbrush. That makes total sense. So, from those early days to now, how has your role evolved as the company has scaled?
That's a great question because when you launch a startup at the very beginning, it doesn't matter how much resources you have. You may have many millions in the bank and you can hire people to do all the jobs, etc. But I believe it's crucial for the CEO and other members of the C-suite to do every role or as many roles as possible, to go out there and be a salesperson, to be a customer service person, to be an operations person, to get involved with marketing, to get involved in every aspect of the business, because that's when you really get to understand your clients, your customers, their pain points, their goals, their objectives. So that's what I did a lot of. And I mean a lot of in the first years. Now, as we started really getting that product market fit and getting traction and started to grow very quickly, then as we hired people, I was able to delegate a lot of these functions. And now sometimes, I'm really proud of my team because they really work like a clock. There's the old saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I'm a firm believer in that. And so if you get the right people and you create the right culture and you set up the right processes, after a while, there's not much for you to do because everything's working. It's kind of the analogy, if you're the conductor of an orchestra and you're just starting out, maybe you have to play the violin at the beginning. Maybe you have to play the piano at the beginning. Maybe you have to play the drums a little bit, and so on and so forth. After a while, you can kind of step back and you've got your baton and everybody else is doing the hard work and you're just kind of making sure everything flows in the right direction.
They're all staying on beat and moving forwards.
Exactly.
So now that we understand kind of the foundations, I'd love to hear your take on the current environment and just about the landscape since it's becoming competitive. And so, what are some of the biggest shifts that you're seeing how companies approach UX and usability testing today compared to even just a few years ago?
Sure. Well, I guess it's no surprise that the biggest disruptive change is AI. Everybody understands that and understands why. Uh, for us, we had been focused on AI for many years because one of the products that we deliver are audiovisual recordings that are full of really interesting insights. When you do a quant study, you can put up a graph and you've got 1,000 participants and you immediately see what the results are. If you have 1,000 videos, somebody has to listen to them or watch them. And so it's not that quick to digest what is very interesting feedback. And so we always thought that AI would help us achieve that. And when ChatGPT launched, really changed the landscape. It was kind of like when the World Wide Web came onto the scene in 1994. So we quickly launched an integration with OpenAI and we started getting the quick wins, if you will, like that. But for me, taking a step back, I think this revolution is going to have incredible impact on the UI. So I'm very keen to understand how AI is going to change the UI, the user interface. And I don't think anybody really knows, there's all kinds of theories and, thoughts on this subject, but I suspect that organizations will need to do a lot of user experience testing as they integrate different AI elements into their user interfaces. And so that's good for us. So, I hope I'm right about that. But
Yeah. So, with the crowded field of usability tools, what do you think are your guys' differentiators that you're really leaning into right now to stay ahead of the competition?
So we have some hard differentiators and we have some soft differentiators. In terms of hard differentiators, we are certainly the most global and international of the major, shall we say, holistic platforms, because there's really two types of UX research platforms. You have some that just do one thing, but do it very well. And there are others that try to do everything or almost everything. And we're in that category. And of that category, I believe that we are the ones with the biggest international footprint. We have business customers in 40 countries. We've done projects for those business customers in 80 countries. We have literally in our panel of participants in every country around the world. Just out of curiosity, one time I took a look to see if we had anybody in North Korea, and surprisingly, yes, people had signed up from North Korea. Okay, that
Wow,
was interesting.
very interesting.
Anyway, my point is that, our international capabilities are certainly one of our differentiators. On a soft differentiating side, I would say that our customer service, and that's really a byproduct of our corporate culture, is best in class. I mean, we measure ourselves in terms of KPI, in platforms like G2 and Capterra. We measure ourselves, Trustpilot, et cetera. We measure ourselves in terms of, Google Play, the App Store, and we're consistently either the top or just up there with others in the top ratings. But in addition, anecdotally, the kinds of feedback that we receive from our clients, like such and such person went above and beyond to help me with this goal that I had in this project, and so on and so forth. So we love to hear that. And so I think our customer service is best in class. I would also say that when it's the industry says about us out there that if you have a hard profile, a very narrow participant profile, or a complicated project, that we are the go-to people to go to. So, there are great companies out there that compete with us, and we try to keep ahead of them or abreast of them in terms of the latest innovations and usability of our own products. But I would say those are the things that really distinguish us.
And where do you see the UX testing industry heading over the next 2 to 3 years? And what are you guys doing to prepare for that future?
Yeah, that's a great question. Until now, UX research has been the purview of a very small group of people. They may have their own UX research and UX design department. They may be embedded in product organizations or in other organizations. But this tool that allows you to observe, market research is one thing. You're asking people their opinions. What would you do in this scenario? What do you think about this? User research is observing what they actually do. And that's really quite different. And I believe that the benefits of that can be leveraged and should be leveraged way beyond just the UX research department and the UX design department or the product department. There's a movement out there that's called continuous discovery, whereby all types of people within an organizational setting are encouraged to spend at least 1 hour, 2 hours every week or every 2 weeks just observing their customers' interactions. I would love if some of the CEOs, Fortune 100 companies, spent a little bit of time per month just to see what's going on with the interaction between their users, because it would really open their eyes, and that would help affect change within the organization. So another term that is widely used in our industry is democratization of user research, which basically is a similar thing. It's basically going beyond the people who are doing it right or using it right now and benefiting from it right now, and to other departments, the marketing department, the market research department, customer service, innovation, digital transformation, etc.
And so, shifting gears a bit, I want to talk about growth. So, you've definitely built something that's clearly resonating with quite a few companies since you are global. And I'd just love to understand what's working and where you're pushing harder. So, what marketing or growth strategies have driven the most meaningful results for you in the past year?
So that's a hard one to answer because we've been using for the past 10 years, I would say, pretty much a common set of tools that most companies use in B2B settings. Uh, PPC, SEO, content, event marketing, all of those things. What I think is interesting right now, and I don't have a good answer yet, but is we're seeing a massive shift. Again, this is because of AI, whereby it's quite possible that a year from now, where you spend your dollars is going to be radically different because people may no longer be using the traditional search. And when I say people, that's especially true for B2B settings. A B2C customer might take a bit longer to change their habits, but a B2B customer, they're going to be using all these AI tools. And are they going to do a traditional search? Probably not. They're going to go to whichever is their favorite AI tool. And so what does that imply in terms of SEO? What does that imply in terms of pay-per-click? Big change. And we know, of course, that Google and others are experimenting with new ad formats to address this, but it's still a work in progress, and still remains to be seen how that all will pan out.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely have already seen companies finding themselves on the AI chat GPT searches and that becoming the new Google, right? So, which strategies have you tried, if any, that didn't work as expected? And what did you learn from those experiments?
Well, at the very beginning, we spent a lot of money going to events and sponsoring booths. By the way, we continue to do that. We sponsor events and all that. But until you really know who your ideal customer profile is, you can spend a ton of money going to the wrong event, sponsoring the wrong event that you may intuitively think, well, they should be interested. But if you don't know for sure who your ideal customer profile is, In retrospect, we probably could have spent our money in a better place at that stage of the game. So the other thing that I think we perhaps made a mistake at various times is, I don't know if you've heard what Bill Gates said about innovation, where he said that people overestimate the impact of innovation in the short term and underestimate it in the long term. And I think that you can take that concept and apply it also to your investments in sales and marketing within the context of an innovative startup, because you may expect a very quick return on that. And it's almost certainly going to take a lot longer than you think to get any traction. And then you may just think, oh, well, that was a waste of money. And, okay, let's move on to something else. But it turns out that what you did, it was like you planted seeds that may come back, and all of a sudden, a year or 2 years later, all of a sudden you're getting the benefit of something that was planted long ago. So I think that way of thinking about the short term and the long term that Bill Gates talked about is very applicable here.
And so, behind every growth story and company, there are challenges, of course, or issues that founders have to face. So, what's been the hardest part of leading a remote first global platform, especially when it comes to team coordination and customer experience?
Yeah, well, time zone is one. So when we started out, we were in San Francisco in terms of the headquarters, but we had our development team in Spain. That's 9 hours. And it's not so much a question of whether the people will be connected at the same time. That's easy. Hey, you need to work from this time to that time. But somebody who's waking up, here's an example. It's 7:30 almost here where I am right now in Europe. It's 10:30 a.m. where you are. So, your state of mind is completely different because, you're energized. It's the beginning of the day, ready to go. And my state of mind is, I'm ready to, dial it down. And so if you apply that in a corporate setting, that's a difficult one to navigate. And I don't think there's any black and white answers there of how to do that, but that's certainly an issue. Ultimately, what we did was to move our US headquarters from San Francisco to Miami, because at least then, 6 hours, that's more doable. We have staff in the West Coast and even in Hawaii, but that's, at least the coordination between the two main, the European subsidiary and the US headquarters, was easier with only 6 hours. Yeah, and then, but this is not true only of a remote first company or of a global team, but the importance of people. So after I sold my last company, I remember going to an event and I was listening to a very successful entrepreneur. He was running a company, fairly large one. And he said, I spend 40% of my time on people things, on HR things. And I'm like, you're the CEO. That's crazy. But I understood the point later on that he was trying to make. It's one of the most important investments of your time is corporate culture and people. And that's true whether you're a national organization or an international, whether you're working across time zone, whether you're in the office, out of the office, no matter what.
Absolutely. And what's one aspect of running Userlytics that you wish you could solve faster? Something that needs fixing but has remained difficult?
Well, I would say you talk to your team, you talk to your clients. They say, it would be great if your tool could do ABC. And you want that, you agree. You want that to be there tomorrow. So it's, the impatience, it's reining in your impatience because you know where you're headed. You know what you have on your roadmap. You know the things that are going to be available, and you just wish they were available today. But, at the end of the day, tomorrow when you have those things, there'll be new things. And, that's a never ending story. So it's important to be patient.
Yeah. And so I want to now talk about what's ahead for you. What are the top 2 to 3 goals that you're focused on over the next 12 months?
So from the time that we started to today, although we are present in 40 countries, the percentage of revenues from English-speaking countries, which were the first to really adopt in a serious way, user experience research and UX design, they still represent, a very significant chunk of our revenue. And that's not because the non-English speaking world has not been growing fast. It has, especially in the last 2 or 3 years. But the US speaking world is still growing very fast. So in terms of percentages, it just moves kind of slowly. So one of the goals we have is to really assist those countries where UX research is relatively new and the practices are just being implanted in organizations to really help push that faster. And so that's, working in multiple time zones, but also multiple languages and multiple cultures. Always a challenge. It's a challenge we love and we enjoy, but yeah, pushing the envelope there.
So imagine if we're having this conversation again and you're a guest on this a year from now. What needs to be true for you to feel like it was a really breakout successful year, in addition to what you just talked about?
I would say all the AI elements that we have on our roadmap are live and operating. B, we're fairly strong in Europe and the US, but in Asia Pacific and in Latin America and in some parts of Africa, those markets are and also South Asia, those markets are kind of emerging right now. So if we have a much stronger business presence in those regions, that would be great too. And then finally, if our prediction that the implementation of AI into the UI necessitates a much expanded UX research testing schedule, that would be great, great validation.
Great bonus. So I always like to end with an advice question. So, what advice would you offer to other tech founders who are trying to build platforms in crowded markets?
So I think there's an inherent tension that is somewhat more art than science between being flexible, understanding I can be wrong. I have to listen to the signals that are emanating from my customers, from my employees, from the market, from my competition. I have to be very sensitive to these signals and I have to be willing to change, whether it's tactically or strategically or even, a full pivot. But at the same time, perseverance is also a virtue. And sometimes your vision is absolutely correct, but it's too soon. And you have to wait for the market to catch up with your vision. So sometimes you have to change your vision or your tactics or your strategy as you hear these signals. Sometimes you have to persevere. And getting that balance right between perseverance and flexibility, that's a tough one. And there's no science to that. You can't just mix these two formulas together and bingo, you've got the magic potion. It's more of an art than a science. And luck obviously plays a huge role.
Yeah, that's great advice and a good perspective on that too to keep in mind. And so for those who want to learn more about Userlytics or connect with you, where's the best place?
Sure. So userlytics.com is our website. And if you want to learn more about user experience research, usability testing, anything to do with UX, really, that's a great place to start. And both myself and everybody else in the company would love to speak with you. So, we'd like to say, analytics tells you what, Userlytics tells you why. So
Love that. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in to Mo's Market Pulse. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave us a comment, and join us again to hear more insights from leaders coming up on future episodes. And thank you, Alejandro, for taking your time to join us today.
thank you, Sarah. Thank you.